Economic development is critical to Minnesota's future. And just like Minnesota's last Democratic governor, Rudy Perpich, when he ran a campaign, and I remember the bumper stickers, they had 3 words on them. They said, jobs, 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 and a Democrat won. And I think in 2010, the candidate that can connect with workers is going to be the candidate that becomes the next governor. And about me, I remember that Rudy Perpich campaign in 1982 because I was working with my tools as a carpenter. And I ran out of unemployment. And I didn't have money to make the payment to have health insurance, and I had 2 little sons at home, 3 and 4 years old, and we went without it. And I know what Minnesotans out there that are on unemployment right now are feeling. And I know the ones that are counting the weeks down till their unemployment runs out, because I spent 21 years as the business rep for the Carpenters Union on the Iron Range. And I know what it feels like when somebody comes in your office and says, I only got a week of unemployment left, or I just got my last check. There's 240,000 Minnesotans on unemployment this week. That's unacceptable. There are fewer people working in Minnesota today than when Tim Pawlenty took office. His administration has been a failure for the Minnesota worker. And we're going to rebuild Minnesota's economic development efforts so that we start creating jobs around this state, because it's the only way to solve the state's budget crisis.
You can't have a healthy Minnesota if Duluth is hurting. You can't have a healthy Minnesota if Winona or Windham or Albert Lee or any other city across the state is doing poorly. So our economic development strategy has to be a one Minnesota strategy. We need to grow the pie. We need to be aggressive about it. We need to get out there, and we need to do everything that we can by building a better transportation network, by working with our colleges and universities to develop the workforce, by being aggressive in recruiting other companies to come into the state of Minnesota. Talk to any CEO in the state of Minnesota right now, and they will tell you that they get 5 or 6 letters a week from other states and other governors saying, come to our state. They are aggressive about it, and they're not just recruiting in other states, they're recruiting across the globe. Tim Pawlenty has been missing in action in job creation. So the fact of the matter is the pie is shrinking, and what that leaves us with is regional competition and us fighting against each other. Let's grow the pie. That leadership starts with the top. It's what we've done in the city of St. Paul. It's what I'll do as governor of the state of Minnesota.
I don't want to be part of the first generation in our nation's history, and many of you are about my age, to leave this state and nation and world in worse shape for our children and grandchildren and generations to come than we inherited it. And that, tragically, after 20 years of 2 Republican governors and 1 wrestler turned libertarian, and the last 8 years of the Bush administration, is the condition we're in today. 240,000 people out of work in this state. 1,000 people a week losing their unemployment benefits. Schools operating on 4-day school weeks in Minnesota because they don't have enough money to operate on 5. I mean, this is a disaster created by Republican neglect, by Republican priorities on the wealthy, benefiting the wealthy and leaving everybody else behind.
Now, some folks think that we can cut our way to greatness, and we've seen the failure that that leads to. Now, others might argue that we can tax our way to greatness, and I would argue that merely doing that doesn't work. We have to grow our way to greatness. And that's why when I announced my campaign for governor, I went home to Worthington, Minnesota, and first I launched my campaign at my school, where I graduated from 30 years ago, because I believe that education is the best long-term investment to grow jobs. But then I went to Rochester, to the IBEW headquarters, where they're training workers for the future clean energy economy. I believe the way to grow the revenue that we need to fund the human services and the education that we need is in part through the new clean energy economy. We should be building wind turbines here in Minnesota. We should be building the new solar heating and cooling systems here in Minnesota. We should be building the geothermal and the next generations of biomass here in Minnesota. Those are good manufacturing jobs, and the installation and maintenance of those will create thousands of high-paying union jobs across this state. That's the way that we move ourselves forward.
We have priced college out of the market, and it basically is a lack of commitment at the Capitol a lack of commitment, specifically by Tim Pawlenty, but really the state as a whole, to making those investments in our kids. It's just shocking to me as we look at competing globally that the state's commitment to making sure kids have a post-secondary education, that commitment has simply waned. And if we have any hope of stimulating this economy, if we have any hope of creating good jobs and having workers prepared to do those good jobs, we've got to reverse that trend away from state support of our higher education institutions. And I'm talking about it being just as important, if not more important, at our two-year institutions, so that kids who don't need a four-year degree, who wouldn't thrive with a four-year Bachelor of Arts degree, can still be more highly trained and more successful. The answer is really simple. If we're not educating our kids, whether it's early childhood all the way through post-secondary, what are we doing? How are we going to succeed?
Instead of having a governor going around the state thinking of ways to stop the federal government from ensuring that every American has affordable quality health care, we need a governor who will work with the president and work with the Congress to make sure that we have a national plan. It ought not matter where you live in the United States of America, whether you can get access to health care or not. Now, we also need to have a national plan that has a public option. And as governor of Minnesota, if they don't get it done this year, I'd keep reminding the president and our congressional delegation that we need to have a system that challenges the private insurance industry, but also is portable. When you lose your job, you ought not lose your health care. If you want to start a business, you ought not be able to get stopped because you can't get affordable health care. We're going to have multiple solutions to this, and Minnesota, I think, can also lead the way by providing leadership from the governor's office, but also continuing the terrific experiments that we've started in Minnesota for moving the disease management from the insurance company and getting it down into the doctor's office, where we reimburse doctors for encouraging people to be healthy, to actually keep them out of the doctor's office.